Some in Texas may disagree, but I think you can get a killer, tender brisket without any fancy smokers or grills. A good old barbecue rub and a long, slow nap in the oven will yield a succulent, perfectly tender piece of beef. What could be a better partner than some smoky, sweet, and tangy beans? The answer is nothing, so we'll make some. We'll start off here with our brisket, which, by the way, this is not a whole brisket. That would be an absurd amount of meat for a few people. But you can see we've got the flat part of the brisket there. This is kind of a center cut piece, and then the point is that thicker muscle there towards the back of the plate. You could use a all point brisket or all flat. I like having a combination of both. To prepare it, we want to go ahead and cut off any excess fat. Make sure to leave at least about 1/2 to 1/4 of an inch there to protect the moisture of the meat. And I'm going to use a preferred barbecue rub here. You can make your own or use a brand that you like, but you're going to want to very generously rub this brisket down. This could be as simple as salt and pepper, maybe a little garlic powder, paprika, but do however you like, but just make sure you season it very, very generously. If your rub does not have salt, make sure you do add salt because we're going to give this a dry brine for at least 4 hours in our fridge uncovered. I would recommend doing it overnight. When it does come time to cook your brisket, you're going to want to tightly wrap it in heavy-duty aluminum foil. If you don't have heavy duty, use a couple layers. You want to get this nice and tight so we get a lot of steam action in there to cook our brisket and also prevent all of the juices, fat, and flavor from leaking out while it cooks. We're going to cook this low and slow at 275 degrees. It's going to take probably about 90 minutes per pound, depending on the thickness of your brisket. For added insurance on those juices, we're going to place it into a 13x9 baking dish and go ahead and pop that into our 275 degree oven. While it is slowly cooking away, we can turn our attention to our beans. I recommend using a large 12-inch cast iron skillet as it can go directly into the oven for this, but if you have to put it into a baking dish to cook it off, that is totally fine. Go ahead and start to sweat those peppers and onions, and then remember that you forgot a very key ingredient here, and that ingredient is bacon. And in fact, the bacon fat is what's going to help cook these peppers and onions down. We're over medium heat here. We're going to cook this for 4 to 5 minutes just until that bacon starts to render some of its fat and those vegetables start to soften. Of course, we'll want to season everything here with fresh cracked pepper and salt. We're going to add in 1/2 cup of light brown sugar. We'll follow that with a couple tablespoons of good old ketchup, followed by 2 tablespoons of your barbecue sauce of choice. Use whatever you like or what you have on hand. Following that, this is optional, but I like a tablespoon of sriracha for a little heat and garlicky flavor. 2 tablespoons of molasses, 1/4 cup of apple cider vinegar, and 2 tablespoons of Dijon mustard. We're going to add 1 54-ounce can of pork and beans. If you can't find this big bad boy, grab 4 15.5-ounce cans and it'll be basically the same thing. Give everything a nice stir to thoroughly combine it and bring it up to a simmer. And then we're going to place it in that same, and that's convenient by the way, 275 degree oven. Now, when that brisket has hit 165 degrees in the thickest part of the meat, which this one conveniently has, we're going to go ahead and uncover it so that crust can start to form in the oven. The brisket is probably going to take longer than the beans. You can bake them at the same time. Just be forewarned, the beans take about 3 to 4 hours. The brisket's probably going to take 4 to 5 depending on the size. Go ahead and tuck that brisket back in until we get a nice spark, and we've hit at least 195. I'd recommend going closer to 200 or 205. Let that rest for 30 minutes, and those beans are golden brown, mahogany, bubbly, and delicious. Once the brisket's rested and the beans are done, we can proceed to carve. Best way to do this is to find the grain of the brisket and cut against it, so you give yourself the most tender and succulent cut possible. Just look at all those juices just dripping out of there. Okay, it's fat, but it is delicious, flavorful fat. Good brisket should not tear apart easily. It should take a little pressure, just like that, to pull it. We'll serve this up. Get some beans here in a nice bowl. Lay down a few slices of that super tender and succulent brisket. Of course, we've got to garnish our beans with some green onions for a little pop of color and that nice little fresh oniony flavor in each bite. And I'm going to ever gild the lily here by spooning a little brisket fat right over those pieces. Again, it's not falling apart tender, but when you bend it, it does snap under slight pressure. Man, this is a really flavorful recipe. Use a really good rub and definitely keep it low and go slow. Don't try and speed this up and do it too fast. You've got to have time for that collagen and those fats to render and melt down, but your patience will be rewarded with a delightful, moist, rich bite of tender beef brisket. And these beans, well, they went low and slow too, but it gives time for some of those watery liquids to evaporate, the flavors to intensify. You've got smokiness from the bacon, a little tart acidity from the mustard and the vinegar, some sweetness from the brown sugar, barbecue sauce, and molasses. Just wouldn't be right if I didn't try a bite of everything all together. Oh man, I am one happy camper with this dish. I hope you'll give it a try. I do appreciate you watching. Drop a like and subscribe if you haven't. As always, get on out of here and go make something delicious.